The bombing of cafes in 1937, the bombing of buses in 1937, bombing of marketplaces in 1938, bombing of hotels in 1946, bombing of foreign embassies in 1946. I mean, and on and on and on. You give specific dates for exactly what and who and where.
Zionist gangs were the first to introduce the weapon of letter bombs. They were the first to use embassy bombing ever in history when they bombed the British embassy in Jerusalem. Many Palestinian intellectuals were targeted with letter bombs over the years. And they didn't care how it exploded, who is going to be hurt. The most vicious method of terrorism I've ever heard of, when you booby-trap more than 5,000 devices that we know of, more than 5,000. And many of them were health workers, doctors, nurses, and most importantly, people who were among their children. From the 1980s and late 70s, 80s, Israel managed a campaign of car bombs, truck bombs, and donkey bombs. They would sneak them into Lebanon and detonate them in crowded areas and quarters. There's a long history of these kind of weapons and methods that they use. As far as Netanyahu's involvement, in his last book, he bragged about his involvement. In 1968, one night, they came to Beirut airport and they set the entire civilian airline fleet of Middle East Airline ablaze. Just like that. They decided Lebanon should not have airlines. This is a state that in 1974 decided to incinerate a whole refugee camp. The Nabatiya refugee camp does not exist anymore. People don't know it ever existed, because in 1974 it sent private jets and destroyed the entire camp. They have destroyed hospitals and clinics and killed civilians. They have been doing that all along. The only difference now is the scale of it, because Israel is in a state of panic. Recently, they were recording the release of cabinet meetings by Golda Meir. In one of them, in 1973, she says something that whenever they cease to be scared of us, we are finished. And I think that's exactly what's driving this brutality and savagery. They realize the Arabs they are facing on the battlefield are not the Arab armies of yesteryears. These are new breed of fighters who have strong resolve, who do not fear death, who do not seek death, but do not fear death. It's not this embrace of a culture of death at all. It is embrace of the culture of life and freedom. They want to be free of the yoke of Zionism. The savagery of Zionism is built in the ideology. I mean, they decided to create a state in a place that's already inhabited. How else would you justify the project if you do not denigrate the native population? It's just like slavery. You cannot enslave people unless you tell your people they are inferior. And as a result, our enslavement of them is for their own good, because they are not capable of being free on their own. Zionism is exactly that. Theodor Herzl is somebody who pleaded to Europeans by saying, these are savages, we want to create a place for civilization of Europe in the midst of these backward people, basically. And when he is asked about how are you going to be able to do that with a population that is already have an identity and it is resistance against Zionism. And he quoted the French proverb, qui veut la fin, veut les moyens. He who desires the end desires the means. This is the ideology of Zionism. So for that reason, whenever they met with resistance and opposition by the native, they used brute force, massive scale violence from the very beginning. They were the one who introduced all the methods of terrorism that we complain about in the world today.